Hey everyone, welcome back. Or if you're just joining us, welcome to KSSP Podcast. I'm Spencer.
I'm Katie.
And in this part of our nutrition series, we're going to be talking about caffeine. So, what is caffeine? Caffeine is a central nervous system stimulant of the methylxanthine class. It is mainly used recreationally as a cognitive enhancer, increasing alertness and attentional performance. Caffeine acts by blocking binding of adenosine to the adenosine A1 receptor, which enhances release of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Adenosine promotes the sleep drive, or a person's need for sleep. Research shows adenosine also plays a role in the immune system and can reduce inflammatory responses. Receptors for adenosine have also been found in the body's circulatory, respiratory, and urinary systems. Acetylcholine intervenes in numerous physiological functions, such as regulating cardiac contractions and blood pressure, intestinal peristalsis, glandular secretion, etc. Typically, acetylcholine is an excitatory mediator.
So, where does caffeine come from? It's found in the seeds, fruits, nuts, or leaves of a number of plants native to Africa, East Asia, and South America. Best known source of caffeine is the coffee bean, the seed of the coffee plant. And to make these drinks, caffeine is extracted by steeping the plant product in water, a process called infusion.
And we're also going to talk briefly about the safety of caffeine. Caffeine is the world's most widely consumed psychoactive drug. Unlike most other psychoactive substances, caffeine remains largely unregulated and legal in nearly all parts of the world. Caffeine is also an outlier, as its use is seen as socially acceptable in most cultures and even encouraged in others. Caffeine is classified by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration as generally recognized as safe. Toxic doses, which is over 10 grams per day for an adult, are much higher than the typical dose of under 500 milligrams per day. The European Food Safety Authority reported that up to 400 milligrams of caffeine per day, which is around 5.7 milligrams per kilogram of body mass per day, does not raise safety concerns for non-pregnant adults, while intakes up to 200 milligrams per day for pregnant and lactating women do not raise safety concerns for the fetus or the breastfed infants. And a cup of coffee contains 80 to 175 milligrams of caffeine, depending on what bean or seed is used, how it is roasted. Darker roasts have less caffeine, and how it is prepared, whether that's drip, percolation, or espresso. And thus it requires roughly 50 to 100 ordinary cups of coffee to reach the toxic dose. However, pure powdered caffeine, which is available as a dietary supplement, can be lethal in tablespoon-sized amounts.
So, we'll go over some health effects of caffeine. Caffeine has both positive and negative health effects. It can treat and prevent the premature infant breathing disorders, bronchopulmonary dysplasia of prematurity, and apnea of prematurity. Extensive research indicates that having 3 to 4 cups of coffee daily may help you to live longer, and it may protect you from heart disease, cancer, and neurologic, metabolic, and liver conditions too. Caffeine citrate is on the WHO model list of essential medicines. It may confer a modest protective effect against some diseases, including Parkinson's disease. Some people experience sleep disruption or anxiety if they consume caffeine, but others show little disturbance. And caffeine can cause overexcitability. It can disrupt sleep considerably. Excess caffeine in your diet can precipitate or worsen anxiety. Overstimulates regions of the brain that process threat. Caffeine activated the midbrain periaqueductal gray matter, a brain region that is typically activated when a predator is closing in on you. Caffeine also shuts down a brain region that typically helps you regulate your anxiety. So evidence of a risk during pregnancy is equivocal. Some authorities recommend that pregnant women limit caffeine to the equivalent of 2 cups of coffee per day or less. Caffeine can produce a mild form of drug dependence associated with withdrawal symptoms such as sleeplessness, headache, and irritability when an individual stops using caffeine after repeated daily intake. So you may have heard about caffeine-related deaths in the news in the past. So really quick, we're just going to go over this section. The study is caffeine-related deaths, manner of deaths, and category risks from National Library of Medicine. And let me just find the part here. Caffeine-related fatalities. So despite the recent policy of sale restrictions of caffeine tablets, which was introduced in 2004 in several countries, we've identified an increase in caffeine-related deaths in the last years. This is just Table 1 for all the different fatalities. So our study allowed us to identify the manner of death as suicide for 36 people, accidental for 27, intentional poisoning for 2, and uncertain for 27. Routes of administration of caffeine were oral, so pills, powder, liquid, in 46 cases, intravenous in 3 cases, and not reported in the remaining 43 cases. Unintentional caffeine abuse due to excessive intake of caffeine is relatively frequent and responsible for classic clinical manifestations of overstimulation. However, death due to caffeine intoxication is rare, and case reports of fatalities from caffeine toxicity are relatively infrequent. We've identified 28 cases, or 29%, among the 92 lethal cases described in the literature in which death was attributed to accidental causes. So the majority of fatalities were related to the ingestion of a great amount of over-the-counter caffeine products. These tend to be weight loss supplements that are frequently used and perceived as safe, but can be toxic and linked to serious health complications. So just Table 2 here really quick just shows the accidental causes among caffeine-related deaths. 10 non-reported, 9 over-the-counter caffeine products, 3 errors in hospital medication, 2 drug abuse, 2 recreational use, and 1 accidental ingestion by children. So as a result, the category of individuals consuming caffeine-containing products for dietary purposes represent a group at risk for severe intoxications, potentially leading to decease. Despite cases where consumption of caffeine has accidentally led to the death and where caffeine was taken with suicidal purposes, we recognize 3 categories of individuals who have often been involved in caffeine-related deaths: athletes, psychiatric patients, and infants. In the latter group, the manner of death is linked to intentional poisoning and child abuse. The low frequency of these categories in other groups has encouraged us to emphasize these aspects. So with ADHD, caffeine was formerly used as a second-line treatment for ADHD. It is considered less effective than methylphenidate or amphetamine, but more so than placebo for children with ADHD. Children, adolescents, and adults with ADHD are more likely to consume caffeine, perhaps as a form of self-medication. A 2011 study demonstrated that tea might be an effective treatment for adult ADHD. According to the NIH, caffeine increases striatal dopamine, D2, D3 receptor availability in the human brain. So D3 appears more related to the basal ganglia and structures involved with motoric behavior, while D2 is associated with regions associated with cognitive affective functions.
And at normal doses, caffeine has variable effects on learning and memory, but it generally improves reaction time, wakefulness, concentration, and motor coordination. The amount of caffeine needed to produce these effects varies from person to person, depending on body size and degree of tolerance. Desired effects arise approximately 1 hour after consumption and Desired effects of a moderate dose usually subside after about 3 or 4 hours. And a systematic review and meta-analysis from 2014 found that concurrent caffeine with L-theanine use has synergistic psychoactive effects that promote alertness, attention, and task switching. These effects are most pronounced during the first hour post-dose. And then we have an article, or kind of I'm going to call it an article, from the Department of Defense Dietary Supplement Resource Operation Supplement Safety. This is called Caffeine for Performance. And we already kind of talked about like how much caffeine is safe and how much you should use for performance, because again, that's going to vary per person. But I wanted to go over the part that says, how can I tell if my supplement contains caffeine? So if your supplement is marketed for weight loss, energy, or pre-workout, it probably contains caffeine. To see if it does, look at the supplement facts panel. Caffeine and caffeine anhydrous are the terms that appear most often on dietary supplement labels, but they're basically the same thing. Other names you might see include caffeine citrate, dicaffeine malate, and pterostilbene caffeine. These combine caffeine with other substances, which could be sodium citrate, malic acid, and pterostilbene, respectively. Because the caffeine is combined with other substances, the amount of caffeine is less than the ingredient amount on the label. For example, caffeine citrate is about 50% caffeine. So if a label lists 50 milligrams of caffeine citrate, then it contributes about 25 milligrams of caffeine. Other times, the caffeine may be hidden in ingredients such as cocoa, coffee or coffea, green coffee bean, guarana, cola nut, methylxanthine. It might just be labeled under tea, trimethylxanthine, xanthine, or yerba mate. Sometimes the total amount of caffeine is listed on the supplement facts panel. If the caffeine is part of a proprietary blend, you might not be able to tell how much caffeine is in a serving. The amount might be listed elsewhere on the container or not listed at all, so be sure to read the entire product label. And then we're going to move on to diet a little bit. That kind of was a little bit of diet, but I have another kind of chart here from the USDA, and it is just a list of different foods, drinks, and how much caffeine they have per serving. So we can just look here for like a beverage, energy drink, Rockstar, sugar-free. The serving is 8 fluid ounces, and that will have 79 milligrams of caffeine. And then there is milk, chocolate, fluid, commercial whole with added vitamin A and vitamin D. And 1 cup of that will have 2 milligrams of caffeine. And then there's like candy. So like Nestle Butterfinger bar, 1 serving, which is a 2.1 ounce bar, will end up having 1 milligram of caffeine. So if you wanted to kind of look again, we should be able to have them on there. But it is United States Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Research Service, and it is USDA National Nutrient Database for Standard Reference Legacy, Nutrients, Caffeine, Milligram. And if you want to cut down on caffeine but still crave the taste of coffee, you can always switch to decaf, but decaf does still contain small amounts of caffeine, just so you're aware. And then always use caffeine wisely, and I've seen recommendations to generally, I think I saw you want to kind of stop having any caffeine about 6 hours before bed, just so it doesn't mess with your sleep. So that could be like 3 p.m. for some people, but it's going to really depend on like your sleep schedule. So really just trying not to have caffeine approximately 6 hours before bed. And that's gonna be variable too. Like, and if everyone's gonna be different with that, but that is what has been shown to help if caffeine may be keeping you from sleeping. So that was what we had on caffeine. And as always, you can leave a comment below if you have any topics you want to hear us talk about in future episodes.
You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and we also occasionally live stream on Twitch, so you can follow us there to see when we do.
And don't forget to give this video a like, as well as follow or subscribe to our other social media accounts and turn on notifications so that you get notified when our new content comes out. Otherwise, we will see you all in the next video.